Connor, you are the guy that I call when I'm trying to figure out AI or Claude Code. You have this ability to break down complexity into simple terms. So today we're going to dive into exactly how anyone can get started with Claude Code for your business and actually show and break down sort of exactly how you would approach it. And by the end of this episode, what can somebody feel confident to do after just watching this?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to show you how to delegate your first task to an AI robot employee.
Awesome. So by the end of watching this, people will feel confident to assign their first task to a robot employee and get it done. And amazing. Let's jump right in. So where you've been in the AI space for a while, how do you think about using Claude Code, and where do most people get stuck in terms of just getting started to assign that first task?
Well, I think a lot of people, anybody watching this that's thinking about Claude Code has probably tried ChatGPT. You may have tried Claude. You may have tried DeepSeek, Gemini, any one of these chat apps. But I think there's a real fear gap in going from the chatbot to an agentic tool or any of the coding assistants, because you might not be an engineer, you might be a marketing person, you might be a business salesperson, but the truth is a lot of these tools are not nearly as hard as you might expect. And even though they're in the terminal or some of them have GUIs, they're still very approachable if you're willing to put in a little bit of time just to do a little bit of research, download a few things that you might not already be familiar with. If you're willing to push through that discomfort and that initial fear, you actually find that it's quite easy to get started.
Yeah. And that has been my experience as somebody non-technical. And that's why I like talking to people like you, somebody who is technical, but has the ability to break things down. And so I think we just jump right in how would you think about getting started in terms of providing the appropriate context? Well, I guess let me back up in terms of even how to think about what are the first tasks to assign to this robot employee, and then the steps involved in terms of given the appropriate context of this knowledge layer, and then getting started with the actual, jumping into Claude Code.
Sure. I think the first step, the step zero here, is actually changing the way you think. And if you're not a programmer, this might be maybe the hardest part, is just starting to reconceptualize how you see the world and try to look at the world in code-shaped problems. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, when all you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. That's actually what we want to create. We want you to think that the only tool you have to solve this is coding. How do you solve this problem? And that's kind of this mindset that we can cultivate. So just start by thinking about the problems or data that you have in your life, the opportunities you have to create solutions, and we'll try to work backwards from there for what you can create using code, even if you don't know how to do it. So an example that I have prepared for us today is I'm a newsletter writer. I have a newsletter called The Friendship Engineer, which I've been writing for a bit over a year. And I thought it would be a fun data set that we could use Claude Code to pull down and play around with. And maybe we could build some dashboards or some fun integrations with it. But really, it doesn't have to be newsletter related at all. It doesn't have to be text or copy related at all. In my company, I use Claude Code for software development to build apps. We also use it to edit policy documents or to automate tasks like checking the documentation every day or reading customer transcripts to see how calls are going. So there's so much that you can do with this that's quite powerful. So just think about an area of your life where you have problems you'd like to solve and where you have data that agents could operate on.
Yeah. And so I think for most people, myself very much included, is like starting to think in these, agentic shaped or AI shaped problems, and are ready to dive into Claude Code, and then find themselves being like, oh yeah, how do I give all the context needed for this and about me and my business? And how do I just get started with assigning that first task?
Yeah, sure. So I just want to jump right in and show you some stuff. So I'm going to just go
Let's do
ahead
it.
and start sharing my screen. So I have done the tiniest bit of prep, but only a very small amount. So this might look a little scary, but don't be alarmed. I'm going to explain everything. So what I have on the right is called a terminal. So if you're on a Mac, just do Command Spacebar to bring up the Spotlight search. And if you use Text Terminal, it'll bring up a window. I use a special one called iTerm, but they're effectively the same thing. And this is the command line that is oh so scary. On the left here, I have a file editor. It just allows you to view files. So what I've done is I actually had Claude Code go ahead, and I asked it one sentence or two sentences. I want to turn my podcast library into a local document repository. If I point you to my Substack, can you go and grab all my blog posts and put them in their metadata and files? I actually use text-to-speech this. The text-to-speech isn't that good. So I hope this shows you how imprecise you can be and still get a good output here. Basically, can you get all my blog posts and their metadata and put them in files in Markdown directory? My blog is this link. And basically, the agent just ran on its own. It prompted me a few times, and I had to give it permission. But once I did, it was actually able to pull my entire blog archive of every post I've written, such as the survival of the friendliness, the friendship pipeline, the friendship engineer's holiday gift guide, so on and so forth. And it actually downloaded all of these newsletter posts for me. I did not have to go and download 75 posts by myself and just put them into a little folder for us. And so now the next thing we can do to actually run Claude Code is you just, after you install it, I'm not going to walk through that. You can go to Anthropic's website and download it. It's pretty simple. You just type the word Claude. And what that does is it opens this little interface, which it's basically a chatbot. It's basically ChatGPT, and it just gives you a little window that you can type into. And when you do that, all you have to do is ask it to do stuff, and it'll do it for you. I haven't practiced any of this, so let's just do something together. Mitchell, what's something that you want to know about my writing? Maybe my posting schedule, how many words I've written. What do you think would be interesting?
Yeah. So essentially what we've done here, we've given it a data set. And that data set is all of the newsletters that you've written. And so as somebody who also has a newsletter or, does content, it would be interesting now to like pull out themes and, understand like if you had you synthesize Connor's writing style, like who is the target audience, what type of writing style does he do, that sort of thing. And the other thing where I go of like, could you then turn this into more blog posts in your style, or at least drafts?
Yeah. So let's start with that first one. So I wrote a quick little prompt that just says, can you read all of my blog posts? Can you pull out my core themes, target audience, and signature traits? So let's just run that, and then we'll see what happens. And then for our follow-up prompts, we'll look at maybe creating a new post and see how that goes.
Yeah, and then as this is going to, you happen to be the writer of this, but we could have done anybody's newsletter, or it could have been, we could have first say, hey, study this data set. I'm looking to create something similar if somebody is just getting started and wanted to do this for themselves, right?
Yeah. Real quick interruption. So I want to point this out. So this is something you're going to see a lot in Claude Code. This is a permission request. So it's asking me if it's allowed to read these files. And so I'm going to just go ahead and say yes to all. So this is a thing where you can run into issues if you allow the agent to do too much. But I find actually it's not really much of a problem anymore. The actual Claude team has done an amazing job at creating safety constraints so that you can actually give your agents permission to do a whole lot. So if you ask your Claude agent to delete everything on your system, it's probably going to be able to delete everything on your system and might cause some problems for you. But if you're asking it to just do normal everyday tasks, you're pretty, with some caveats, please don't do anything you don't know what you're doing. But if you want to do some things that you don't know what you're doing, it's probably going to be okay. For the most part, in my daily work, I am not entirely blindly, but like mostly just hitting yes, continue, yes, continue, yes, continue. And so I wouldn't be afraid to do that. Just don't ask it to do anything that you know would be destructive.
Right. And the big distinction here is ChatGPT, or even, just regular Claude, is interactive. And it doesn't have the ability to go and read and write, or to go and write files on your computer. This has full access to your computer.
It doesn't quite have full access to my computer, but it does have access to the folder that it's in. And so it is reading the files in the directory. It's going to write some new files. And there are actually some extensions coming or that have been delivered recently where you can give it even more access to your computer, where it can open PowerPoint for you, where it can open Slack and send messages on your behalf just all through your screen. And that's actually one of the cool things about OpenClaw, which you may have heard of. It's a little bit designed more like that. But now the Claude team has been copying a lot of those features and trying to pull them into Claude Code directly. So if you're not a super on the edge hacker, you can have much more accessibility for those features in a more standardized, easier to use package.
Yeah, and I know you've gone down the rabbit hole of OpenClaw as well. Would you say that the ability to do that in almost a more constrained or safer way is quickly coming into Claude Code?
1000%. The Claude Code team launches a new feature about every day. If you watch their Twitter account, it's absurd how much they release. A lot of it comes out in feature in a preview mode first. So you might not get it on day one if you're not enabling research previews. But honestly, within weeks, these things are coming. And there's already other tools like Claude Cowork, which is actually a less technical version of Claude Code. If you want something even a little more kid glovesy to use, that's still very powerful.
Right. And this is why we started with Claude Code rather than OpenClaw. It could get a little technical and harder to maintain and set up versus, sure, there's a little bit of figuring it out in Claude Code, but once you do, that's why I like having you sort of explain and how you think about this prompt and other ideas just to give context to how it actually works.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's definitely tiers of difficulty. And I actually think Claude Code is more on the entry level than some people realize.
Right.
If you want to go really extreme, some of what I do, as you'll see here, we're waiting for some responses. And that could be a little tricky. I probably should have turned down the thinking mode here so it'd be a little bit faster. But because these agents might take a few minutes to cook, I'll run multiple of them at the same time. So I'll actually just run 3 or 4 abreast on my screen, and I'll just have one going at each time. And by the time one finishes, I have to do something for the next agent, and I'll just be flipping back and forth. Or, I have also on my phone OpenClaw. So I'm texting OpenClaw through Telegram chats to ask it to do things for me. My company also has agents in our Slack channel that we can ask to do things for us on our behalf. So there's a lot of different layers and pieces you can add if you get really deep into this.
Yep. And for what we're doing right now, like what are some other examples of things you've either set up in the business or in, some of your content to just give some ideas?
Yeah. So like I said, so my company actually, one of the things that we do that I really like is we operate a telephone service, or that's a weird way to put it, but we serve calls like a call center, except ours are more for AI companionship. And this generates a lot of customer transcripts. So every night at 7 a.m. or 6 a.m., something like that, every morning, we have our agent read through all of the transcripts from the previous day. And we have it flag issues. So if a customer asked for something and the agent responded to it in a totally unrelated way, we flag that. If it asks for the weather and we gave it the wrong weather, it'll flag that. And that's been super helpful for us because when you only have a few customers, it's really easy to read all the transcripts to work on the call quality. But when you're serving hundreds of calls per day, it very quickly gets to a point where you can't really read everything.
Yeah.
So it's been super helpful for us to actually monitor our calls at scale and find the issues and troubleshoot them really quickly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, so this actually just finished. So if you want to know a little bit more about the friendship engineer, you can find that the core themes are that friendship friendship as an engineerable system. Who would have guessed that one? Hosting a social infrastructure, conscious living versus the default path, personal transformations through systems. Target audience, primarily men aged 25 to 35, likely in tech or knowledge work, living in cities, analytically minded. Yeah. Signature traits, voice, conversational, slightly irreverent, like a smart friend explaining something over drinks. Casual but never sloppy. Vulnerable hooks. So yeah, so this is our, we don't have to read all of this, but I think it's pretty accurate. So as a follow on, can you generate, let's say, 3 new post ideas in.
What about that dashboard that you're like? How often will you
Yeah.
go to a dashboard versus just going to do the work?
Okay. So I think we got to pick one, probably one at a time. So I'd say, how about, can you make a quick dashboard to show me my writing word output by month? If you wanted to, if you were more coding familiar, you could put in some words here that might be a little bit more specific. You know, build me a React app, build me a mobile app, build me a special graph using this framework, or something that I could put in PowerPoint. You can give the agent additional instructions if you want to shape the output, but I'm just going to be pretty vague here, and just to show you that this is going to produce something. And it'll might not be 100% what I want, but it'll kind of work, which is all I need, because I wouldn't put the time into doing this myself. This is just kind of a fun freebie.
Yeah, and as that's running, like this is good because it's giving me ideas of all we're doing here is we have this data set of things you've written, and then now you're looking at it in different ways to then go and do different actions. And so if we wanted to get super, I mean, I don't even think that this is that complex, but like, can you talk about like what would it look like, for example, if I had set this up on my, if we're using yours as an example, and then knowing who you're writing to and your writing style, could you give it access to something like Ahrefs and do keyword research for similar keywords that people are Googling, that it would make sense for you to maybe come up with a blog post idea or new content ideas that already are getting like, searches from keywords?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's like a fantastic use case for agentic workflows. And now actually, Claude has added scheduled tasks. So you could even automate that so that it runs every day at 8 a.m. or something like that. So it's really helpful. If you give it your API keys, if you give it access to these services, it's very happy to use them for you. And what's amazing is you don't even really need to tell it how they work. In the old days of like 6 months ago, you might have to be like, this is the documentation for this Stripe API. Can you please wire up a Stripe payment portal for me? Now, if you do that, it'll be like, why are you giving this to me? I've made millions of Stripe dashboards. I already know how to do all this, which is pretty cool. Oh, and here's our dashboard.
Whoa.
So in total, I've published just shy under 100,000 words. We average of 1,500 words per post, 4,000 words a month. My current output, not so hot at the moment. But I had some good months. And so, you can look at, oh man, all my posts sorted by length. Man, this holiday gift guide 2024, very beefy. It was a good one.
Banger. So this is a blog post, but this could be anything. And then this could then, inside your business sort of be a hub that you start to work off of, right? And then like, would you kind of create other workflows from here, or have this, run every once a week and send you an email or a Slack message? Like, what are some ideas that you could do from here?
So what I would do from here is I just asked it to make this little dashboard, but you need to do a little bit more. So my next prompt would be something like, could you productionize this dashboard for me, or could you host it somewhere so that it's always up? And I talk through a way to do that. Then after I do that, I would think about ending my session. So Claude will have stored all the files in a directory for me, and I can come back and start new sessions whenever I want. So once I had this on some URL, some link, or a provider, so that the website is just always there at connorswriting.com, then I would just go through and say, what do I need? How can I make this a little bit better? Okay, it turns out I want to start mapping publishing time. And then I'd say, okay, can you update the dashboard so that it also has the publishing time? And the important thing is I'm really just asking for what I want. None of the things that I've done here required any coding knowledge whatsoever. Right. It's all just words. It's all just product mindset of thinking about what you want and asking for it. And one of the cool things about Austin, I went to some of the meetups for these Claude Code and OpenClaw tools at South by Southwest, and a few other places over the past few weeks. And the pattern I've consistently seen is the people who are using the tools best are not actually engineers. The people who I've seen who've had the most interesting use have been people who are more like empowered marketers and empowered product people who are trying to go from being very product minded or problem minded and then adding a bunch of new capabilities to their skill set that they otherwise wouldn't have. And those are the people that have been the most successful that I've seen here in town.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it, because maybe you're just using your curiosity and seeing like what else could happen, and maybe are not constrained in the traditional way. I guess the final thing, like, this has been awesome showing the overview, kind of how you think, and turning it into a prompt and then getting it productionalized. Any other additional like resources or context that you would add for like getting started, or having like, I think you use Obsidian for your knowledge layer versus a Google Doc, anything like that?
So the biggest tip I'd say is to learn Markdown. If you don't know what Markdown is, it is very simple. But when it comes to dealing with text, PDFs might look simple. It turns out PDFs are like the most complicated software known to man. I don't know who created that document format, but if you've ever like accidentally opened a PDF in a text editor and you just see this giant blob of like scary like machine code, like that's what PDFs actually look like. And we've had to invent billion-dollar companies to like just learn how to read PDFs. These large language models actually really prefer to use this language called Markdown, which Markdown isn't really a language. It's actually very similar. It's a markup language, not a programming language. It's closer to HTML than anything else, but it's super simple. And this is actually Markdown right here. I can just show you. Basically, like you can render this, and it'll show you this is the source code version, and this is the rendered version. And so you just apply these little tags. Like, so for example, use the pound sign to indicate a header, or if you want to do a link, you put it in brackets and then parentheses. So there's just like a few small like formatting things that you can do to do like quotes or whatever. But it's a plain text format. And so this is something that if you start working with documents will be super common. It takes 5 minutes to learn. And once you just learn this format, it's very easy to read and write documents to the LLM for it to work with. That'll come out formatted nice and beautiful for you.
And so how would you recommend someone being like, they could just talk into ChatGPT or Claude of here's context about me, and then just tell it to put it in Markdown format, and then like where would you store that context?
So I would think about creating a folder for it to live in. So I think of all of my projects belong in their own folder. You might hear engineers call it a repository, but you don't necessarily need to connect it to Git or anything like that. You can just use a folder, like no ifs, ands, or buts, like no complications. You can just have a folder, but try to keep that project within that folder. So whenever you go to Claude, you want to cd, change directory. That's one terminal command you might need to know. That just moves you in your file structure to move into that folder. And then once you're inside that folder, you want to keep all your documents there, because essentially your Claude agent will only know about the files in the folder it's in. So just try to keep it constrained to one folder. That's all we would say.
And so whether that's a Google Doc, you're saying turn that into an actual document that lives in that folder, not just a Google Doc.
Exactly.
In Markdown.
It'll be easier for you. Some of the agents, they're getting better working with Google Docs, but they're not great as far as I've seen. That'll probably change in like 3 months, but right now I would recommend trying to have a folder on your computer with your documents there in Markdown format if possible.
Awesome. Connor, you're the man. Thanks for coming on. Any final words or words of wisdom or nuggets you want to share with the people?
Really, the best teacher is just trying this yourself. It's so easy to get started. It can be really intimidating, but there's guardrails in place. Like, you're not going to do anything bad. Nothing bad's going to happen. Just try something out. And when you don't know what to do, ask it what you should do. Like, just say like, hey, I don't know what to do. Or it says, do you want option A or option B? And you say, I don't know the difference. Can you explain it to me? And it'll explain it to you. Like, that's the magic of the moment of when you're stuck, you can literally just say, I'm stuck. and it can probably tell you how to get unstuck. It's so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks to Claude and AI, and also people like you who generously share what you're learning with the rest of us. So appreciate you for coming on and excited to dive in more.
All right. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah. Good luck. Happy coding.
Awesome, dude. See ya.